welcome. Thanks a lot for coming to this session here. I tell you this, you know, I actually met Alex was it in May or something? And he asked me some questions in the regards of security and authentication and stuff. Say, why do you make a session about that? So I made a session about that. And I showed it to him, I think it was Monday, this Monday. He came to my house and I showed him, I have prepared this for this session today. And why? He said, because you asked me to. Did I? Why would you talk about something else? And essentially this is the something else, combined with a bunch of stuff. But this is meant to be a nerd speech. Yeah? And I guess most of you are familiar with these kind of geek speaks and nerd speaks. And part of it is you guys providing information, you guys telling me what you think about stuff. So I'm actually kind of headed off with talking about, we're going to talk about authentication, but this up here, this is so much 2011, huh? And I saw it in the agenda and it says two-factor authentication. It is not called two-factor authentication any longer. This is like 2011. It's called multi-factor authentication. Why? And this is where I peak technology-wise, by the way. This is when that's the top of my technical skills. But I'm just going to kick it off, and then I hope that some of you guys will provide some of your stories in the regards of authentication. So basically authentication has to do with ensuring when a person logs into a given system that he is who he claims to be. That's basically the job for an authentication system like ours. And by the way, I'm from SMS Passcode. I'm the CRO. I just turned into a CRO. I have no clue what it means, basically. Eventually, over time, maybe somebody's going to tell me. But I've been there for quite a long time. And we do this authentication thing, huh? And we do it in a rather smart way, thing. And at the end of this session, I will tell a bit more about how we do it then. Right? So you start about, if you can, or you dare, tell me about the stories around authentication in your opinion, and then I will at the end explain to you guys how we do it and how we do it differently and stuff like that. But the thing is that we are a security system, and authentication is basically because there's some bad guys out there. Some bad guys who try to sneak in, they try to take on another person's identity and log into a certain given system. So if there was no bad guys, there would be no need for me. My kids wouldn't be fed, and I wouldn't be able to come here and sponsor the beers, by the way. Thanks. Okay. You don't have to.
Thank you for the bad guys. Thank you for the bad
guys. Bad guys equal beers. Okay. So, and the bad guys are coming, you know, and that's the good story about being in the security industry. The bad guys are on their way. Bad guys are coming. This is just some of the bad guys. But the bad guys come basically, and they have new tools, they evolve. This is like the old kind of bad guys. And then there's like more modern kinds of bad guys. I just saw this when I was at the Hauptbahnhof, but the real bad guys are coming. The real bad guys. They come disguised as everything, you know. You can never see. It's very hard to distinguish a bad guy from a good guy, basically. And there's actually people thinking this guy is good, but he's not really. He's one of the bad guys. And
there aren't any really bad guys with it. It's just all you vendors telling us there's lots of bad guys, so you must buy our products.
Of course. And buying products adds equals up to beers. So, that's a good story. I don't know what your point is, but that But there were actually a time when there was not that many bad guys. You see, back here, not many bad guys, just under 1 million bad guys. This is phishing is essentially what you're afraid of when you're afraid of people stealing your identity and trying to log on as you guys into your Citrix system stuff. But that's one of the tools, basically.
What is when you are not satisfied with your identity and somebody steals it?
then you should be glad. If you have a bad identity, if you like Justin Bieber, I don't know. Or maybe you
You're an expert, you know, that's why I asked you.
No, but I guess there's a bunch of people who would be glad if somebody stole their identity. But I think in those cases, people they get over time eventually. They like have to stick with their identity for some reason. But then it picks up, and then it says like just over 1 million and bam 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 bam, just 12.5 million now. So so this thing, and that's lucky for us, you can say, who deals with authentication in general. This becomes a bigger and bigger and bigger problem actually, and there's a bunch of different reasons for that. There's a bunch of different reasons for it. You can say essentially the reason why people want to steal your identity has to do there comes some kind of value out of it. For example, I would like sometimes to steal maybe George Clooney's identity, but on the internet I might want to steal like Paris Hilton's identity, you know, to log into her image library or something. But I don't know. Maybe not Paris Hilton, I don't know. I don't know what kind of flavor you guys have, but at the end,
Alex, the pictures for
At
me.
least we know you're
Almost as it counts. Just don't drink live.
sometimes it could be obscure reasons, huh? But at the end of the day, it has to do with some kind of value, and there's more and more value being put out there, huh? More and more value being put out there in all different kinds of ways. It could be money-wise or political, just for the fun of it. I grew up in a very, very rough part of town, so I know why people become badasses. And sometimes they become badasses just because they can, at the end of the day, huh? And it can be fun, it can be everything else, but this is actually a real, when you cut away all the fun part, then this is actually a real serious problem, because it causes so much damage, so much problems, so much greed in the world, because there are so many bad guys out there.
There was recently a case in the news where a guy got his identity stolen completely. All of his iPhone, his iPad, his iMac got wiped the lot. He lost it. You know why? He had a 3-letter Twitter handle.
Yeah.
That was the only reason why they did it.
Yeah.
It happened to Sandra Brother 15
Throw
years
it
ago.
and I not catch it.
It's just a whole situation. Quite interesting how it happened.
So,
Mind there was also the news article where the woman handed her phone in to the Apple store because it was broken,
Yeah.
and then was being texted by a guy who'd been given her phone.
Yeah. Yes.
All of her information he could view. So that's not necessarily identity, that's identity access. Do you know what I mean? So you can secure your stuff with a variety of products. But if you've then got to rely on the person who's giving you that data storage location to be decent with it. Because here's Apple allowing people to access data regardless of what it is that they're doing. Because their iCloud, is it? iCloud, yeah. Because their iCloud's wrong. So identity theft can happen, not necessarily because you've done something wrong, but the person who is storing your data has done something wrong.
Yeah, but it was a bit different. So what happened is that it was identity theft, or let's say this was classical social engineering. It was not alone Apple. What they did is they phoned Amazon, and Amazon put out the credit card details. And
Amazon would give out the last 4 digits of your credit card number.
The last 4 digits.
And Apple needed the last 4 digits to identify you.
Yeah, that was the issue. So they closed it, but it's classical social engineering thing, because you can phone everybody, and let's say
if there's no internal procedures and those kind of things,
first level support. So I can phone at the companies or stolen laptop or used laptop, and you go to the first level support.
Yeah.
And this happens all the time. So this is classical social engineering.
So who has two-factor authentication on their Google accounts turned on?
And your question was?
Who has two-factor authentication on their Google account turned on?
Yeah. Oh, who has that? That's not many.
That's not many, and we're a crowd of fucking geeks.
Yeah.
Who have heard this story.
But
The question is, as we are the people who actually do this,
Yeah.
You know, we want to have this propensity. We want to have our data anytime, anywhere, anyhow, with everything what we have on, as is from cafe machine to anything we have.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we don't think about to say, okay, it may be dangerous, but we don't care.
No.
We don't really care.
But
And
That could be a reason.
But you know, even two-factor authentication can be weak. So I was at an IT security conference, and RSA did some keynotes,
Yeah.
and I spoke with them. You know, as the master seed was out, in the
Yeah.
they have to replace all the tokens because it was out the master seed.
Yeah.
And this,
So different kinds of authentication mechanisms have different kinds of security patterns, etc., etc. But I think one of the key questions here, for example, is this: all the thing about the cloud kind of stuff, whatever that is. But moving things out into the cloud. Do you guys think that is actually going to bring on new kinds of security threats, or is it just kind of like the same but in a different flavor? I was actually at the RSA security conference, and there was actually people already now talking about that the cloud might not really be the thing. Why? Because the thing is that once you consolidate your functionality and your data in whatever that thing is, the cloud, your vulnerability and your capability as customers or end users is like given away. And just like Amazon, who was down basically, and you couldn't really do anything about it, and just like RSA getting the C5, you couldn't really do anything about it.
yeah.
So how do you guys see this thing about the authentication, identity theft, moving into the cloud kind of stuff? Anyone has a comment on
As
that?
soon as you have a security process, then you have a security weakness to that
Yeah.
process. And by moving back to cloud, everything you've got to log into, everything you've got to authenticate to, you've immediately got a vulnerability there because you've created a process. So the more processes you have, the more vulnerabilities you have. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're keeping everything if you keep all your money underneath your mattress, right, you've got to secure your house. But if you're keeping everything in your identity with Google, with Amazon, with iCloud, with whatever, then everything is slightly vulnerable, and you can daisy chain off one.
What is really
I think
interesting-
also a point is if you the more you consolidate your data and services into one big cloud, the more interesting it is for the bad guys to hack it in there. So,
Yeah, because it's like single sign-on.
And
if somebody wants to hack in somewhere, we know that always some ways to do that.
And the best proof of that is that RSA got the C5 stolen. I mean, that is like the crown jewels of IT.
But RSA was special, yes. The competitors of RSA could say, yes, your security depends on your secret algorithms. Now somebody has stolen your secret algorithms and now you're busted. The real security will not depend on secret algorithms, but on information you have control of, not information your RSA has control of.
So what's the whole thing, right? Something you know, something you have, and something you are, right? So one thing I like.
Yeah, but the concept of RSA was
Yes, something you are.
the secret is
Actually,
RSA's side and not my side. Yes? It was their secret algorithm on which everything was depending, not the information I can create, but the information RSA can create.
Yeah, but I think that's a very good point. That's a very good point, and the thing is that suddenly I'm not in control over the security myself any longer. That's regardless of me relying on a vendor who creates something where something can go wrong at his place and infect the security at my place. And that's obvious. That is an obvious statement about cloud in general, isn't it? Because you have stuff out there and you have a very tough time doing anything about it out there. And actually there's people thinking that not just because of the security part, but a bunch of other things, that might not be, that might actually kill the draft of cloud in general. That people are not, at least it brings up some consideration before the cloud really is there in the full aspect that people expect it to be.
So there's a news story recently about some woman in the Nordics, and she's been using her Kindle for ages, big reader, she had however many 100 books, and Amazon, she woke up one day and she had no books on her Kindle, and she tried to log into her Amazon account and couldn't log in. And said, emailed the person and said, I'm sorry, your account has been associated with a parent account, so we've closed it down. And she's like, well, I have no idea how this has happened. I've not, I don't know anybody, I don't, and she wrote another thing saying, please explain to me so I can sort this out. And I wrote that back saying, I'm disappointed, sorry, I'm sorry that you're disappointed by the outcome of this, but we're not allowed to tell you anymore. And that was it, her Amazon account was completely gone.
Right.
And
because it was misused for something.
well, no, it was
Because of mistake.
Because of mistake. Yeah, some mistake. And there's no recourse.
No. No, there's the SLAs of these kind of.
The best is, you know, she actually, some blogs put her protest letter
Yeah.
online, and that moves Amazon not to explain what happened, they only move Amazon to bring books.
Yeah.
They didn't say, you know, okay, sorry, you know, can happen. No, they only say, okay, you get your books and forget it. You know, and forget all the case. That was actually funny.
But I think one of the things with you, Helge, your point there as a social engineering kind of thing, I think some of the trends in the security industry right now also goes to that. You can go up to a certain level with technology, huh? Up to a certain level with technology. And we as technologists have always thought we should solve all the problems of the world with technology, huh? But the truth is we cannot do that.
No.
And especially not in the security aspect. Nowadays we just have to teach our users to have good behavior, and we don't really have any choice. And essentially, for me, the C file of RSA was equivalent to the British Queen's crown jewel. That must be the best protected piece of data.
The question is how much obscurity.
But hang on a second there, Sasha, because I mean, you probably have MI6 and MI7 and the police force and the military and CIA and FBI and James Bond and Spider-Man. Everybody's watching that piece of data, but it still got stolen. But essentially, it got stolen of a combination of social engineering and technology. Huh? So regardless of what we have done, basically technology-wise, we couldn't have prevented that essentially. And the truth is that if the bad guys really want stuff, they get it. Huh? I usually, when people ask me, well, what is the most secure way of handling data? That's actually not creating data. The most secret.
Don't give it to a human.
Or don't give it to a machine. Don't give it to actually, the most confidential data of the world is never written down anywhere. That's when Putin says to Obama, "You gotta fuck those bastards now."
So I do totally agree. What is really interesting is if you see the leaks of password stuff or the password databases. Yeah, and this is again social engineering kind of, because people are fed up sometimes and you reuse the password to remember. And if you go to a company and have a really strict policy of seeing passwords where the people have to change their password every week or so, and people are fed up with this. The problem is you're using the same password for, let's say, social websites and stuff, and if one password is out, and sometimes
then it
the
replicates to a bunch of others.
Yeah, and what the bad guys do is to try, because the last thing was stolen. It was, I think, was a social media website, but the users were not logged on because the data was moved to this data center, and this was stolen and out on Facebook.
Yeah.
And the hackers try on, let's say, Facebook, and they're in.
Yeah. But nowadays you can buy amazingly advanced tools to do like brute force attack and etc.
You don't have to buy.
No, but if you want, if you want 24/7 support on these things, you actually have to pay $249 for that. But these guys deliver 24/7 support on some of the most evil tools of the world.
Yeah, but I want to ask a question before. You know, in your code, how much is obscurity?
What?
How much obscurity is in SMS passcode?
How much obscurity? What do you mean?
You know, it's...
Now, how much security?
Obscurity.
Security through obscurity, so that it's secure because no one knows about it, not because it's secure.
In SMS passcode?
Yeah.
Okay, I get to that point in a second. But SMS passcode...
No, that's only a question. You can say not logged, none...
No, but...
It's not allowed.
He's CL or something, I don't know. He
No, but the truth is, this is the truth, and it probably not comes as a shock as for you guys. Any kind of system have vulnerabilities. All kinds of systems. If I ever said something else, I was lying. What did you mean, Sasha?
Obscurity is, obscurity is when we have, for example, I have coded transcription to Jim. Yeah? But we don't know that you all know what we are talking about, and we have some kind of scrambling. Yeah? But only way, the only. For example, if nobody knows, but because they don't know the joke from Jim, which is actually the scrambling algorithm.
Yeah.
But the question is, that's not secure.
No.
That's not secure because.
But it's just because you guys do something.
Yeah, but it's actually not. It's only obscure because nobody knows. But in the moment when they find out what this is, they know all the codes.
Yeah.
And that's not really what you expect for security.
Then to answer your question very, very fast, then SMS password is extremely secure because
That's secure, how secure?
But it's secure in the not in the, I don't know if it's an obscure. If I do actually understand your question, but the stuff with SMS password, we do stuff in real time, and depending on who is doing what, when, and etc. I don't know if I understood your question, Sasha.
It's something secret inside.
If there's something secret inside of it?
Yeah.
No?
No, your question is, if you show me your code, can I hack his site?
No, that's what I want. Actually, the thing is, and we actually use that as a key selling point nowadays in SMS password. Everybody could steal our source codes even, and it would never bring any of our customers into danger. Whereas a lot of other vendors, they have that thing. But let me try to continue. What? Yeah.
Because a lot of these security systems, they are actually secure because the how to say the beginning secret nobody knows except few people.
Okay. But then SMS passcode do not have that vulnerability, and we do actually use that as a key selling point nowadays. And there's actually people nowadays, they choose SMS passcode security. We have like federal banks and police departments and military intelligence and stuff like that choosing SMS passcode, and that's one of the facts. And that is not, and you can say the RSA thing actually just proved that it's important. Not that they got the seed files stolen, because in my opinion that's actually not a vulnerability to RSA at the end of the day. It's more to prove to the world that if the bad guys want to get hold of something, they do that. But this is SMS passcode. This is what we aim to do. We try to create the best kind of solution for handling these kind of issues. That's our goal of life, basically. Yeah? And I will go very far through this. And the reason why, and I heard people say platform today, I actually consider SMS passcode to be a platform that is really good to adapt to new kinds of threats, basically. So we have built a platform that happens to be very, very good to do authentication. So for me, SMS passcode is more a platform than it is a product, really. And some of the stuff I can show you later.
Just one interesting thing from the IT security conference. So what I've seen is was live hacking, and it was really interesting. What they did, do you know MSI catchers? Do you know something? And what they did is, how many people have iPhones or Androids here? What they did, let's say, created an access point where every smartphone was connecting to, because it's called telecom.
Yeah.
Okay. And the interesting thing is they use Metasploit for this, and every smartphone is polling if you connect it like here to WLAN, and every smartphone is polling every second. If you are, let's say, more powerful than a real access point behind it, and they just intercepted everything from all smartphones, regardless if it's Android, Windows, iPhone. They just showed it. This is really interesting. So you can intercept, and it does cost you $1,000 for this equipment. It's so cheap, and you can intercept everything.
But the truth is, and that has been a lot of stuff. This is the shortest version of it. This the thing about can you actually get a mobile phone to connect to something else? And the truth is that a mobile phone tries to connect to a list of preferred networks, and you can actually you can in some cases interfere with it, but there's actually no real known cases of that have happened in a you can say in an uncontrolled environment. In an uncontrolled environment. But the threat is there, and basically I can tell you, even though you could do that with SMS passcode, it would not be a threat, but I can get back to that. But you know, the tele industry, they have so much focus on security, so in general, one can rely a lot on those kind of things not happening. But what you should be afraid of is, of course, that your mobile phones nowadays, your smartphones, is just small PCs essentially. So therefore, we got to see much more antivirus and firewalls and stuff going on to smartphones because we have to protect them just like anything else.
Yeah,
but
it was really interesting. Sorry for interrupting you again.
No problem.
What it showed us is there is a special box what you can buy. It's for military.
Yeah.
Where you put your smartphone in. And they're working with the police if they catch the smartphone.
Yeah.
It just is that this box stops from Poland.
Yeah.
And this was really interesting for, let's say, how's it called? For deep down analysis, if they catch somebody or something, that remote wipe, you do this from Apple or something, or Android, that, let's say, the usual suspect can't remote wipe it anymore.
Because they have something that intercepts in between and removes that.
That was really interesting for me. So,
but it's an extreme big industry. All this about device management in general and mobile security is things are moving extremely fast. But let me give you some points. SMS passcode, lots of customers, lots of partners, lots of awards. Basically just cutting through the marketing bullshit kind of things. Because I actually wanted to tell you guys where this session started, just so you got an idea of it. It actually started there. I just wanted to show this picture.
Are you doing new track?
No, this was actually Munich. That's actually Alex before he got drunk, huh? And he asked this question: why do we need these advanced multifactor authentications?
So is that an exploit or a vulnerability?
This is both. This is actually both. This is actually Alex being exploited. And like half an hour later, he was very vulnerable, very vulnerable.
Looks like a
But he also dared to ask the thing, what's the difference between all these kinds of systems? Huh? What's the difference? And then, but basically, there is a difference between these two things. But you know, they're both cars and they're both from Germany. 4 wheels, horsepower, etc. So maybe for the untrained eye. And that's actually one of our problems. Being a small Danish software vendor, some of our problems is, of course, how can you tell the difference between security systems and security systems? What about SMS-based solution and SMS-based solution? Just like, I don't know if Maybach really had that problem with this thing here, but...
Did we have something like time between failures?
What?
Time between failures.
Yeah, that could be one of the parameters. That could be a bunch of parameters, huh? But basically, we say in SMS passcode, you can get a Maybach for the price of this, huh?
So what you're saying is the one on the left is cheap, easily repairable, and will get you there.
Yeah, eventually over time. But then my good friend Jason came along. And Jason said, I have no clue how I can help you with Alex, man. And especially in these events, you all know he's like, you can't really get into him, huh? So why don't you just show him? And why don't you, for example, show him what you can do with Splunk? Isn't that true?
Oh, yeah.
It's a true story, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
It is a true story. And then Alex came back and he said, yeah, show me. Just like he did. Back here, that's like 38 seconds from the first picture. So now he's actually drunk. And we say, okay guys, let's go and do it. And this is, for example, what you can do with Splunk. And I actually have some points here, which is...
Don't show this slide off too much. I'm doing a presentation on this tomorrow. Just gloss over it. Gloss over, just there. Yeah, and then go, oh, we'll do something with Splunk and then talk about something else. Otherwise, 10 minutes of my presentation tomorrow is wasted.
No, but listen here, the point is, and then we can get back to you guys talking again, huh? That's what geek speaking is all about, I guess. Lots of geek speaking, huh? But from a security officer, if you're a security officer, you basically want to be fed information so that you can do stuff, huh? The bad guys never sleep. Huh? They eventually always create and prepare new tools to do bad stuff. That's what bad guys do.
They get more money.
And they get more money, and they become more efficient. And nowadays, people actually say that the identity theft, the cost of the crime around identity theft, and the value that the bad guys get out of it is now the biggest crime of the world. That is the biggest kind of crime in the world. It leads drugs and prostitution and a bunch of other things. Huh? So we want to feed these people with information, and the reason why I show you guys this is because this amazing product, Splunk. Can you give me the beers we talked about? One of the things we can do is that with SMS passcode we can monitor who logs on to what from where. So we say, right now we have a guy from our management team logging onto a Citrix web interface from Copenhagen. Now we have another guy logging on from Italy to something else, basically. That's the kind of stuff we do, which is essentially not really interesting. Huh? The interesting part is to see who tried to log on from somewhere and didn't manage doing it. Huh? And so that basically, because essentially, if you could say that you could block out the bad guys, just imagine that you could block out the bad guys. You will eventually probably have a happier life. And you can actually do that with Splunk. With Splunk, we can actually tell from which people tried to log on to what and didn't manage to do it. Basically, that's typically a hacker attempt. Huh? And just with our solution happens to be, and this is not a sales pitch. Of course it is. Of course it is. Anyone who believes anything else would be living on a different planet. But then you can actually block entire areas out, okay?
That's not really kill.
What?
You cannot kill. If I come from Russia, yeah, I will find some point in Europe and then I try from there.
And that brings me on to, by the way, we have a pattern, but that brings me on to this. But that brings me on to this because you've got about. Sashi said, but you can spoof an IP address and pretend you come from a different country, and that wouldn't work. And that's true. Actually, all security has to do to make it very, 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 very difficult for somebody to do stuff. Huh? Anyone who says that they prevent people from doing stuff, just like the RSA C5 being stolen, they lie. Just because you have airbags in your car doesn't mean that you can't get killed, really. So what you have here, and you see they're going like a madman. No, but the thing, and then you can think about this, and we, for example, for SMS Passcode, would love to have feedback from you guys. So if you had another idea, why don't you guys do this and you do this, and then we can help you guys to bring the world into a more peaceful and happier place. We are like not one big family. And the thing is that you always have an attack surface, okay? You always have and that's where, basically, if it's authentication, that's all the different ways that bad guys can sneak in, huh? And in the authentication aspect, you can actually narrow that thing in if you add a username and password. I'm actually so old that I remember the time before we had username and passwords. Anyone? You remember that?
I log in.
You don't look. Actually, I remember the time before we had usernames. Yeah, and basically because I could just tell anyone you can just try. If you can do anything with that thing down there. I'm the only one who knows to operate that thing.
So I got computers.
Anyone?
What? Nah. No, but we
Beer. One beer. Beer.
42, Alex. 42. I counted 42. But essentially, just want to try to make it tougher and tougher and tougher and tougher and tougher. And then you can add, we are something, then it says tokens, can you see that? It says traditional 2FA, dinosaurs, 2011 kind of things. Then you can be challenge-based. SMS passcode is a challenge-based solution, and we are session-based solution. And that's eventually what brings us into a less vulnerability. We are less vulnerable if somebody steals the SMS because it's linked to a session. That's a long story. And the thing about us being able to look at who logs on from where is also a good thing, because we see all the hacker attacks comes from Ukraine, and you have a man in the middle attack, and you block out Ukraine if they don't know about spoofing. But then we know about behavior as well. But the thing is that there's always a hole in anything. Huh? There's always, even in SMS password, you would probably find a hole. It has not been proven. But you know, the most secure prison we had in Denmark, it was so amazingly secure that they put the prisoners in, and then they built the prison around it because nobody were allowed to get in and out. Huh? Almost. If they got new prisoners, they were like thrown over the wall, you know. So then you throw food into them. But the thing is that, but even that, it's just a matter of having a big enough thing. Then you can actually break into the biggest. That is actually a giant bulldozer. There was no way that you can get these guys out. So one bad guy, he stole a giant bulldozer and just ran over the wall. And they could have all the electronics in the world trying to prevent that from happening. If you have a bulldozer that's big enough, you'll get in.
I have another one. Just one big point to SMS, another one.
Yeah.
Interesting is that there was a big telco, and we implemented some, as you know, some kind of SMS passcode solution. And then we tried to get to the SMS gateway.
Yeah.
And then it told us, yeah, we are in transition to another solution. But they gave us access to the SMS gateway, and it was via Telnet.
Okay.
And I told them, hey, come on, this is Telnet.
Yeah.
You should do this technology 20 years or something, this is not secure.
Yeah.
They told us, yeah, we have slight problems. So this is not SSH or something.
No.
And that's the weakest point, because the most attacks are from the inside perspective. If you go to Telnet, you need just Wireshark, and then you have it.
Yeah.
So that's completely.
There's not all people in the world that are smart enough, and that's why you can get so far with technology. But then you have to raise the skill set and knowledge. Do any of you guys, just for the fun of it, how many of in here is actually resellers selling stuff to IT? And how many are end users actually? What the fuck are the rest of you guys? Are you winners or something?
I asked myself like 6 years ago, what I'm doing here.
What are you doing here? So you're not
Especially seeing as you're a gardener.
But do any of you guys have internally in your company's IT security policy?
Yes.
How many have that? How many have that?
Everybody does.
Everybody has that.
I don't.
How many of you guys have actually read it then? No?
I signed it.
What, that's half a hand.
Nobody wrote it.
How many think that,
I really signed it though.
how many think that anyone outside of the IT department have actually read that thing?
I think they read it.
Somebody
I guarantee you're wrong.
There's a difference between can and should, isn't there? So they read it, yeah, and then they sign it, and then they ignore it.
Yeah. I think.
I don't necessarily think that they ignore it on purpose, and so you had an earlier point which was, all we need to do is educate the users.
Not all. We have to combine that with a piece of technology.
Yes, you have to combine that with also buying SMS passcode and putting it into your
Open and everybody will be happy, and the women will be more people.
The difficulty, I think, is
And then we will have lots of beer.
Yeah.
No, actually no. That's
I think the difficulty is articulating why it is important for them to have security, because they don't normally, yeah?
Exactly.
So they'll all of their bank accounts will have the same PIN code, they'll have a simple password on their Facebook which will match what it is that they've got at work.
But isn't it true that
What does it matter to them if their Facebook account gets hacked or their work account gets hacked? So that it's articulating why it is important to them
Well, plus we're,
to them and the organisation, because it's not just about them.
we're training them to do the wrong thing. So we're training them that in order to have a secure password, you transpose the letter S for the number 5 and the letter I for the number 1. That's what we're training them to do, or a dollar sign.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
everyone and their dog knows that that's what they're going to do.
It's yes.
Password security is not.
There's
We're not
like
training them to do the right things.
There's a CD cartoon about exactly that.
But Andrew is complete right, because what I have seen is...
I'm obviously completely wrong.
What time is it, Andy?
Not necessarily all the time.
When he's here, he's right.
But let's see
No, I am always right. You all got the wrong time. That's how that.
What's your point, Evan?
My point,
Telephone. Yeah.
phone
Yeah.
call,
Say you're busy.
SMS passcode.
Actually, we do voice calls as well. It should be us. We don't do SMS necessarily.
My point is,
Swinging back.
my point is, even you have two-factor authentication or something,
Multifactor authentication. You have to learn the word.
what I've seen with this Mac kind of style, or even on Windows, what I've seen with Wireshark is, even you're in the people are using Dropbox, and Dropbox has now a better security, but the problem is, they're then in, and they're using Dropbox because of the security policy
Yeah.
to share some files down to the cloud.
So they move around. And why do they do that, Evan?
That's the reason.
They need to get their shit done.
Yeah, that's the reason why if it says share file or something, or every vendor has now some kind of secured Dropbox kind of stuff. Because Dropbox is easy to use, and they're fed up with their emails and stuff, with PGP or something, and they use just Dropbox to put it in the cloud. Even they're authenticated, because
I understand. And the reason why we do it is exactly as you said, they want to work, huh? So if IT departments put too many obstacles in front of us, I just bypass that. But the reason, I just want to say, because I think you're wrong actually, and I'm going to buy your beer anyway. Yeah, I agree to that. Because I don't think they read that thing. I think they sign it and they ignore it, and they might not sign it and they don't know about it. And I think the reason why they use Dropbox is because they want to work and they don't count the security to be enough. The value or the risk for them is not high enough. And the understanding of the security risk.
If you think about all these demonstrations.
Then we're in agreement, aren't we?
Yeah.
Whether or not they read the security policy. Say they do.
Yeah.
It's about applying what it is that you've got as a security policy to you the individual.
Yeah.
And quite often, to them the individual, they don't care.
Yeah.
If it makes their life a hassle,
Yeah.
then I'm going to do it. What's interesting though is a lot of the banks are now starting to send out two-factor authentication things.
Yeah.
If you want to pay people money, you need. I've got one in my bag. If I have my bag here, so Marcus is sending one, Cole is sending one. But the trend is for your personal use, two-factor authentication is coming in as a norm.
Yeah.
For nothing.
Well, it's
Sorry about
they
that.
call you on the phone and tell you have to put in the PIN number on the phone.
Yeah, I have to now contact my bank before I go abroad because otherwise they just stop my card and then I can't buy stuff from Saturday.
Happened to me yesterday.
So I think over time it may change, but at the moment they don't understand the impact
The
on
needs and the impact.
Yeah.
It's always a risk. Well, what do I risk by using drugs? If I knew that my babies would be killed, for example, just to put it a bit exaggerated, if I use drugs, I might think about it actually. And then me personally, I would get a careful put anyway.
But we're also talking about
but it's the risk, guys. The risk.
We're talking about two different things. Your authentication is one thing, and then there's the security of the data. That's another thing. So it's just you validating yourself to whatever. So if you validate yourself to Dropbox and there's no security in Dropbox, it's a waste of time. You having a 19 character password. 37 was one of the things quoted at Synergy. One of the guys in the security cloud said he had 37 characters.
Yeah.
Really?
Because I get it wrong every time and block it.
There's different things. There's your security in validating that you're you, and then the security in the cloud about the data that you keep at risk. And they are two different things. And if we try and mix them up, we get confused.
But actually, I heard a person. I think it was the HR manager of Symantec actually. which and Symantec, you know, that's a big security company. They're actually beginning to think in new ways to teach people stuff, huh? Because they realize that people do actually not understand the value or the risk, or they don't even read those security measurements. So they have thought about new ways of bringing this kind of knowledge into people. And one of the ideas they had was to make themes. And one of the ways to make themes is, and if you can bring their employees' kids in, and the kids know it as well, they had like a even bigger purpose, and if they can teach each other, it would be an even bigger purpose. So they actually made some kinds of boot camp kind of things, and around school start, for example, when everybody starts at school, people are in a certain set of mind, huh? And when you're on this particular...
Just tell you busy.
No, that's it. Mom, I'm gone. No.
But this is not a good idea because you know that you know that the source code of Symantec antivirus protection has been stolen.
And PC Anywhere.
Yeah, and PC Anywhere too.
PC Anywhere's gone, it's all gone.
PC Anywhere, who is using PC Anywhere?
Well, what I'd like
No, but it was many years ago it actually got stolen by the Chinese.
What I'd like to see for authentication, validation, is more. It's not just a log on.
No.
I'd like to see it for actions, like you do in a bank.
Yeah, for every transaction.
Not necessarily for every transaction, but for different things.
Oh, Dave,
When the value raises to a certain level.
For when the value, so I'd like services that are delivered over the web to have the ability to authenticate at different times. There's a difficulty when we're publishing applications, when we're delivering remote desktops, that we do it once, we ask them when they log on, right?
Yeah.
And then we never ask them again, ever.
Some does.
Some do, but if you're going to have a truly mobile solution, you should be asking people regularly.
Yeah.
Is this something you? Not every time you open a Word document, but definitely if you're logging into SAP, or if you're logging into your CRM application, if you're authorizing expenditure, there should be
this is the user off because the end user experience is
no.
degraded.
You see, I think this links in with their bank account, where people are going to start thinking in a different way, because when you've got an online bank account, you're quite often asked, are you sure? Do you really want to pay Dave £200?
Well, they've got
I got this, obviously.
Well, they've got a post-it screen that reminds them of all the things.
But it depends. It depends on how cumbersome it is, because it agrees if you like every 5 minutes have to authenticate yourself. But there is actually a trend in the authentication space called continuous authentication. Yeah. And continuous authentication means that you use different kinds of tools. You might actually use, as all of you eventually will do, use SMS password, obviously, to do the initial authentication so that we know it's you. But for example, once you have authenticated and we know which device you have done it with, then we can keep on asking it if it's the same device, for example. If you can see stuff that is unique, and we might be able to see what location that device is in. And if the location begins to differ, or you move into another location, we might have to re-authenticate. But the continuous authentication, where we all the time, we don't take for granted. We don't take for granted that you continue to be who you claim to be just because you authenticated once. That's basically a point, I guess, huh?
Well, I've heard that some banks are using, instead of passwords, like obviously passwords, but with pictures.
Yeah.
So if you recognise the picture that's presented to you, it might be a personal picture. That if you recognise that, then it will let you in.
Yeah.
And I think Microsoft is using that you tap certain points on a picture to authenticate.
Mint do that. Mint credit card. When you sign up, gets you to put in a phrase and a picture that you recognise.
But that's basically for that. That's actually not really meant for authentication. That is meant for you to be able to recognize if you are if you have been phished, basically, if you're on a phishing site. Because this about you knowing what picture is yours is actually still only one factor. Because you know what picture it is. You don't have anything else. You just have knowledge, which is like your username and password. So those kind of mechanisms are usually meant for you to identify whether you are under a man-in-the-middle attack or phishing in general.
I have another thought. How many of you have seen on any demo of, it doesn't matter if it's Synergy or VMware or whatever, how many times have you seen a multi-factor authentication with all these fancy demos?
Never.
Never.
Okay, what happens if a manager is going to a demonstration of my device, and another device, and another device, with just a 4 characters password to get in. I want to have that too. So why do you need smart card?
I think it's
It's security awareness, which is not really showing on new product demonstrations, or working from anywhere with any device. That's nice. But what if you have a smart card to authenticate to your desktop, and you want to provide an iPad to your manager?
No, you can't do that. There's no smart card support for iPads or hardware.
So what the hell are you doing there?
There's
Give
one.
the password
That's why
back
you
to
should
your
use
manager.
smart.
There's one company that does proximity stuff with.
You can do a three-factor authentication with an iPad device or something like this. There are devices in the market that have like a flicker or something that read out secure data and encrypt it on the device.
If your manager's user account is forced to log on the smart card, if you enable the smart card, okay? So what do you do there?
Sasha, should we all be quiet?
Sasha, you can't hear you.
Sasha's on the phone.
Everyone, shush.
If you're going to try and do that, Sasha, you need a couple of ribs removed.
No, put your legs up against the wall.
We've all tried it. We've all tried
One other point here is, you said, what did you do with your iPad, huh? But all this bring your own device kind of thing, of course, it's got to make you think differently as well. Maybe you cannot be as device dependent as you've been priorly. And I think one of the things is, one of the major things, maybe bring your own device actually never come into action. Huh? Do you know of any companies who does it? And everybody says, yes, I know one. Yes. How many knows more than 10? Then how many knows?
You're just picking a big number now, that's not fair.
No, exactly. But maybe, is it possible, do you guys think from a security point of view, or is security a matter when we talk about bringing your own device?
I think if you're going to bring your own device, there needs to be that two-factor authentication, because you can no longer rely, like you used to do, on people being in your building. Yeah? So you can no longer rely on them having come in.
You have to make security for the user easy. That's the ultimate goal. Because if
otherwise we will not use it unless you know the risk. Huh?
You have to make it easy, and you have to get them to understand the context in which they're operating. That's the really hard part. Easy is relatively simple. I mean, you could deploy solutions like SMS passcode, but
that's easy.
Yeah, that's relatively simple.
Very easy.
It's getting the user to understand that they need to do it.
That's the thing. But I can tell you, you ask about how many have seen any managers at Synergy, VMworld, etc., logging in using Multifactor. Who have ever seen Mark Templeton doing it? I actually have a picture. I actually have a picture of Mark Templeton logging in with a password. By the way, you can come and see it after. Yeah, I do. Really? But by the way,
are you doing a demo?
Yeah, exactly. Take a look at it. No, but the thing is, I tell you because I do actually. I'm fortunate enough to travel around almost to any country, part of the brand, and there's huge differences. Huge demographic differences, huge cultural differences, huge geographical differences in how people adopt and think security in general.
So which country is the weakest one?
But the truth is actually the more south you go, the less secure they get, basically. Yeah? And then and actually the US have and the US do not have the same perception of security in general, I would say. And some of it has to do with the cost, and then we have financial crisis and stuff like that. And Denmark actually, and Scandinavia in general, is actually very fast usually to adopt new kinds of technologies and trends in general. So, but they are huge, but it also depends on what kind of. But nowadays, how do you know any? Do you guys know of any company who do not have antivirus?
Yes.
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 Yeah. Do you know more than 10?
Big number.
Yeah. Do you know anyone who don't have firewall?
So what you're saying is ultimately it should be two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication should be as synonymous as firewalls as antivirus.
I personally believe it's going to be like that. Yeah. I believe that one day, and it's probably, and I've obviously predicted that for a long time because my car becomes bigger and bigger. But I do actually think that one day, very soon, very soon, that's probably within the next 20 years or something. You never know. But then it's going to be, you cannot use a system when you log on with only a username and password.
You want to start your car, first you get SMS.
Let me ask one.
No, but that's actually, but take a look at how the cars are nowadays. I come from a bad part of town, huh?
As long as I don't have to wait for the SMS to get a beer, it's okay.
Let me ask you a question. Nobody of you is talking about biometric passwords. I ask myself why the development of biometric identification isn't taking any speed. There's nothing happening.
Daniel,
can I tell you why?
It's a big problem.
Yeah.
Because if you lose your name, identity, you can go somewhere and change your name. If you lose your password, somebody corrupt your password, you can change it. If somebody corrupt your fingerprint, no way that you can never recover. You have it forever. That's the problem. That's the problem.
There are solutions that implement three-factor authentication with fingerprints, which you hold your credentials, in case with fingerprint, on your own device. So you have to three-factor.
But when it gets collapsed, but then it gets collapsed. You are finished. The only way you can do is that.
Guys. I have a theory why biometrics will never really catch on in mobile moving environments.
It's too much hardware.
No, the simplest word is dependencies. And the school I come from, it said something like this: the more systems that your system is dependent on, the more likely it is that your system will not work. And the problem with biometrics is you depend always on the scanner. You depend on the scanner being distributed, the logistics, there's driver for it, has to be updated. What do you do with the iPad? And then people come with Android kind of thing. So I think, so for static
takes too much stuff.
Yeah.
It just takes too much stuff, and it doesn't actually. And then there's a security vulnerability on top of that. But help up with the hands, guys.
You stole my hand.
No, you see, that's biometrics.
What happened lastly is that the vendor of almost all fingerprint systems had a security issue and distorted the password. It's almost kind of two-factor authentication in a registry, but with base 64 encoded, so this is not encoding. And everybody who has access to a registry and base 64, come on, this is the admin password. So this is really interesting. You get your fingerprint, but the password is in the registry. That's really, really hardcore.
Yeah.
And you still not fixed it.
Yeah, but the problem is there we have a problem with the passwords. So there's nobody here in the room that has like maybe less than 30 accounts in any platform, isn't there? Yeah. And you say to me that you use in every platform another password? You're kidding me.
Yes.
LastPass on your iPad?
Yeah.
Like single sign-on?
Yes.
Like single sign-on with the application, not the browser. With the application, not the browser. There is no. From my point of view, if somebody has an acceptable solution, in my point of view, right now there is.
But that's why you should use
easy solution.
But often the thing is, we have a Dane here, and because I have to see him often in Denmark, I have to give him before. What's your point?
With the security.
You said you did somebody talking.
Yeah, you took a hand. You're a terrorist, whatever. You take
That's solved by James Bond solved that in '74 with the thing about reading if there's heat and pop. And your point?
So you said the problem with biometrics is that you've got to have a thing out there.
That's one of the problems,
right? I mean, SMS passcode needs a
mobile phone. Everybody. Okay, what's the difference? Who in here does not have a mobile phone?
And who does not have a mobile phone with a camera on and that's a scanner right
No, that's a different issue. The issue there is you as an individual will have a phone, right?
Yeah.
But for biometrics to work, every single device that you use needs to have the biometrics stuff in. So now,
how likely is your dependency? That's the problem.
So now you've made all of these other devices more complicated. Whereas if you just needed a phone, or maybe it's not SMS passcode, maybe you need a token.
So
maybe you need a phone call.
All you need is a camera and an app.
No.
No, I mean, that's very low security, by the way.
What
But
you need
help-
is a 10 seconds DNA analyzer.
That's true. They're coming up. They're actually. Okay, then we have Thomas. Thomas haven't said anything, and I know he'll love to say stuff.
Why is it low security using the eyes, the camera on the phone?
Basically, because eventually it's just a picture. And the way it does it is actually measuring the distance between different points in your head. And and the basic things is if you have to have enough points, the bandwidth you need to ship this thing would have to be big, and these kind of bandwidth are not there. And then you have to have depth, and you have to have infrared to see if you're alive. It's just not a picture. There's a trillion billion things that actually adds vulnerabilities. But I believe that things will be in combination. Maybe face recognition can be used for continuous authentication. Helge?
I have another one. What I've seen lastly is, key pass, so password storage.
Yeah.
And I've seen this on admin terminal servers, stuff like that.
On what?
I've seen key pass on admin terminal servers because there were all password stored for all, let's say, systems, and even, let's say, for keyboard, video, mouse systems, like ILO. Yeah. And they were accessible on the terminal server because KeePass had a security issue. If you get the master password, you
will get all the passwords.
Yeah. And this is rather evil because that's for the admins, for the Unix systems, for ILO.
And you would have to add additional.
And it is
Otherwise there were notepads, so.
So if I got this account, I can log on to the medical data. All systems like ILO. And this is rather bad.
You should have differentiated kind of access.
The main problem I see in the market is with passwords is that you cannot have such big passwords in every system and such complicated passwords.
Therefore you need...
If you look, for example, Microsoft, you can only hold 10 digits. Only 10 in the normal accounts.
10 digits?
10 digits. What is, if you look into TechNet, log on to TechNet, you can only have a 10 digit password or 10 character password. And also, if you look at WebEx, you cannot use you can use numbers and ABCDE, but no special characters like dash.
This is only an issue if the password doesn't get changed. So if it does get changed frequently, you don't care about the password, which might be weak.
But that's why you should, of course, they should add multifactor authentication, then you can. But guys, listen here.
I have something to say.
The time is now 7 o'clock, and you actually managed to stay awake. I think it's amazing. Huh? So, and now Sasha, because the Geek Speak is now over. And thanks a lot for feeding us with lots of it. I hope we got a little bit smarter.